Well, this is a really special episode of our Things Hidden podcast. I'm David Gornoski, your host as always, and we're joined by my friend Shannon Braswell, who joins us from Seattle, Washington. And we have a real great guest today, a special guest. He is one of the developers of the Mimetic Theory in the field of psychology and psychiatry, understanding the interdividual nature of the human mind, the brain. And it's a real treat to have Jean-Michel Oughourlian. How you doing? Did I pronounce your name properly?
Oh, fantastic! I'm very impressed.
Oh, very good. I have a Polish last name, Gornoski, and I get that pronounced Gorszkicki, Gorbitsky, Gorlitsky, Gorditsky. I'm like, I don't even know how you found those vowels and letters in there.
You would be amazed of all the names I get called myself.
I had to practice it 4 times before we got on the show.
Yeah, I'm sure you've been practicing a long time.
Well, here's the book that the first book I got of our guest is called The Mimetic Brain. And this is a really interesting book because it examines the interdividual nature of psychology. And let's just have a little bit of a background for those who are new to your work, because we want this to be kind of an introduction for our younger audience that is interested in mimetic theory and interested in mimetic psychology. So if you would, please tell us just a little bit about your background and how you got into the mimetic theory.
Well, it's a little bit of a long story, but I'll try to make it short. I was already a physician, a doctor, an MD, and I was already I've just been appointed as a young professor of psychiatry in Paris when I read René Girard's book, Violence and the Sacred. And I was fascinated by his theory of mimetic desire. So, well, anyway, I contacted him and we started working together. I went to the United States, work with him. He would come to Paris, work with me, exchanging. And he was very amazed and very interested because he was not a psychiatrist, not a psychologist. And he said to me first, he said, I can't see how my theory can be of any interest in psychiatry. And I said, you'd be surprised. And so we started working and we published together the first book, which was a very important book, Things Hidden Since the Beginning of the World, in 1978. Now, I continued then, working on this subject and elaborating a new meta-psychology, published a book in 1982, which was translated later in the States by Stanford Press, University Press, called The Puppet of Desire, which is, in my opinion, the first book really, sort of a breakthrough in new meta-psychology, mimetic psychology. And of course, it was very interesting because after that we had meetings in Stanford and Seattle and so on with Andrew Meltzoff. Andrew Meltzoff is a great psychologist he's the head of the psychology department in Seattle, the University of Washington, I guess, called in Seattle. And he had worked on imitation in infancy. He would try to stick out his tongue to very, very young babies, mm-hmm. and they would reproduce, they would imitate. And so his theory was of great interest to us, René Girard and myself. We had meetings with him, and his theory was of great interest because it showed that you don't need to have a perception or a representation before you can duplicate. It's some kind of something automatic. In other words, because at one point he would carry a whistle, and they would whistle him or call him the minute the woman would be delivering the child. Yeah. And so he would look at the child, and the child would look at him, first thing he would see in the world. And usually some children have no vision, they can't see, but the ones who can see, he would stick his tongue to them or smile, and they would sort of imitate. So that was very impressive. And of course, after that, I continued working, trying to apply this theory in my everyday practice in psychotherapy, up until one day in 1995, René Girard called me from Stanford and said, we have a meeting extremely interesting. Something extraordinary has come up. You have to come to Stanford as soon as you can. So I jumped on a plane, went to Stanford, and we had a meeting with the people from Parma, especially Professor Vittorio Gallese, who was the #2 after Rizzolatti, and they had their team in Parma had just discovered the mirror neurons, the mirror neurons. Now, the mirror neurons is something fantastic, because if you experiment, if you put a CT scan or a PET scan on your head and mine, and I'm drinking a glass of water, and you're on the other side of the Atlantic just looking at me, in both our brains, the same regions will be activated in the same way. In other words, whether I do the action or whether you look at it, the brain functions the same way. In other words, mirrors what I'm doing. In other words, it's very, 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 it was, I think, it was a fantastic experience, because I think it's very rare in the history of ideas and the history of mankind even, that a theory built on thinking, observing, clinical work would have such a confirmation in neurobiology, in neuropsychiatry, in neurology, let's say. So in other words, we had the pictures to show that actually brains, as long as it's brains of men, of course, of human beings, mirror each other. So of course, the first mirror neurons were registered in the motricity, in the activity, in the motor activity of the brain, like chewing or eating a sandwich or whatever, or drinking water. But of course, gradually, I extended that, because I realized that if you laugh, I laugh. And this is why I built this theory of not the three brains, but the three functions of the brain. The first function is the cognitive brain, the one that allows us to talk, to read, to learn mathematics or whatever. But Antonio Damasio and Joseph Ledoux and all these people working in the United States had emphasized the fact that we also have underneath the cortex another structure called the limbic brain, which is the emotional brain, and that the emotional brain was absolutely vital for the normal functioning of the whole brain. And then I thought that we should add to that a third brain dimension of function, which would be the mimetic function. Because the mimetic function, in my view, is the first one to enter in action. I give you an example. I'm giving a lecture, and after the lecture is over, I go to the public and I put my hand out to the first man I see, and I say, "Thank you for coming." And he says, "Thank you, sir. It was very interesting," so on and so forth. That's a mimetic, because I had a kind gesture to him, and he mimicked the kind gesture to me. And so the emotional brain is activated in a positive way. I am in good mood. I think the guy is sympathetic, is nice, and I think he has understood. And anyway, we are friends, and of course, the cognitive brain gets ready to exchange. But now suppose that I go to another one in the same audience, put my hand out and say, thank you for coming. And the guy says, well, after all the bullshit you told us, I'm not going to shake your hand. You see, that's the counter-emetic action. In other words, I give him a positive sign and he gives me aggressive sign. But what I'm trying to say is that the first contact, the first relation, the first individual exchange is mimetic. I put my hand out, he has a positive answer, we're friends. I put my hand out, he says, I don't want to shake it, we're enemies. The emotional brain goes into, distress, anxiety,
right,
madness, whatever. And the cognitive brain starts thinking, where the hell does the guy comes from? Maybe he is someone who is completely different, which kind of school, which kind of university does he come out of, and so on. So you see, I realized that we could sort of imagine that, in fact, we should imagine or think that, in fact, not only the motor neurons, but all the neurons of the cognitive and emotional regions have some kind of a mimetic function.
mm-hmm.
Because indeed, if you are in a laughing place where everybody's laughing, you laugh, and if everybody's crying, you cry. And if you're watching a movie where the hero dies, everybody cries and everybody's sorry. And if you're watching a sort of a funny movie, everybody's laughing. So there is a sort of a, and if you yawn, I try to yawn, and so on and so forth.
Yeah.
So I think that it is important to see that this is why I realized, I thought and I suggested that there would be those three functions of the brain. The first one to enter in action, the mimetic, and the second one to in the closet, just as in a closet of wearing, dressing this mimetic rapport, the emotional, and then the cognitive brain would put a hat on the whole process.
Now, how does the left and right hemispheres of the brain function with this? Because I've had Ian McGilchrist on my show. I don't know if you've heard of him, the author of the Master and His Emissary, which looks at how the left and right hemispheres of the brain function in different ways, and how the right brain looks at things holistically and empathically, and the left brain likes to cut up everything and divide everything and sort everything. Have you looked at that?
No, I don't buy that. I mean, I'm not into this separation between the right and left, and maybe there's some truth in it. Actually, and nowadays, with the problem of the virus, you can experience the fact that if you get 1,000 eminent scientists in a room, none of them has the same idea. They all quarrel and they all argue. So that's my vision of the thing. And of course, maybe the thing is, the only thing I say is this has been, for me, during 50 years of practice, extremely helpful, helping the patients, understanding the patients. And I must say that the very, 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 very few psychiatrists or psychologists who had been interested in my views, in my work, have used it and reported, that it helped too. The key thing is that what I try to do when I see a patient is not so much find out what he is suffering from, but to find out who he is suffering from. In other words, who is his rival? And of course, this becomes extremely tricky because some people look like friends and they are your enemies.
Yeah.
Some other people, you think they are your enemies, but in fact, they are friends. They want to help. And so this is very tricky to decide. And this is what confuses people and produces symptoms such as anxiety, depression, whatever. So I think that the main thing is to be able to realize and diagnose who is your rival. and who is making you sick. And it's the same actually in physical medicine, if you think about it. In physical medicine, in cancer, the white blood cells who are supposed to defend the organism mistake, they don't recognize the other cells of the body that have transformed themselves into cancer cells. So they are misled. They miss the point, so they don't recognize the rival. And in autoimmune diseases, it's the other way around. The lymphocytes of the body attack normal cells thinking they are rivals.
Yeah.
So they destroy their own cells, which are normal, which are not guilty. And they destroy them because they mistake them for fuse. So,
well, I want to know, here's something interesting I want to ask you about, because in a lot of your works, I've seen you use the analogy of gravitational force, right? Of the attraction of bodies, of celestial bodies, and how it relates to humans. Now, I believe, of course, you were making an analogy there. I have a physicist friend who works in the aerospace industry who believes that when he heard me describe mimetic theory, his name's Dr. Wei-Ping Yu, he's a theoretical physicist, and he said, he has a different view of physics. He thinks every particle can be unified by magnetism. Everything is a form of magnetic fields, right? So including that would include our body. So he would say that we have whatever we intuitively call sixth sense is actually just a magnetic field, and that we're attracting and repulsed by each other. So he thinks there's a physical basis for mimetic theory at the particle level.
this was the theory of a famous psychiatrist called Franz Anton Mesmer in the 18th century in Paris.
Yeah.
He wrote a book called Animal Magnetism. And his theory was that there was a magnetic fluid flowing from the stars and going through every human being, and that the fact that the human beings would get along and be attracted to each other or not was due to the fact that the magnetic flow was coming on the positive or the negative side, would be an attraction or a repulsion. And actually, it is true also that, it's not, I started that in my book, the Puppet of Desire, by comparing his theory with Newton's theory of the attraction, of the gravitation. And actually, when you analyze things in psychiatry and you see a patient, you always find that actually this person is gravitating, going around another one. Let me give you a little story. I had a patient who was a very prominent British gentleman, elderly, who had just retired. He had been for 30, 40 years the principal secretary or secretary general of the Aga Khan. And he came to see me because he was severely depressed. And I said, what happened? So on and so forth. And he said, well, I can't find now any meaning to my life. I don't know what to do. I am depressed. I can't get up in the morning. I'm completely distressed and so on. I said, yes, of course, because you've lost the sun around which you were revolving. You were sort of, you're a useless planet now. You're up in the air, you're not attached to anything anymore. So you have lost your, excuse me?
It's like a comet now, or an asteroid.
Yeah, like a comet, turning loose in the vast world. And so he said, what can I do? I said, you need to cling on to another planet, of course, much smaller than the Aga Khan, maybe much less, flamboyant, but you can find, especially if you enter an organization taking care of other people, then they would revolve around you and you will feel yourself as being a little attractive sun. And he did it. and he came out of his depression with no medication. In other words, without any tablets, which I used to give to other people who had depressions for other reasons.
Right.
So I think, this is something that's been going on, I mean, for so many years. Newton, Franz Anton Mesmer, all these people I mentioned in my book, and I sort of reading back on these, I realized that we all had this kind of intuition. But in the mimetic thing and the discovery of mirror neurons, you find that our brains are sort of Wi-Fi on each other. They are branched onto one another. And in other words, so let's push a little bit the reasoning, which is the subject of my last book, which has come out yesterday. It's the following, that since we cannot do anything else but imitate, since we are sort of condemned in a way, we're constituted in such a way that we have to imitate whatever we see. This takes us to the responsibility of the model, because some models are compulsory. The parents have to realize that they cannot just let the child do whatever he likes. They have to be models. They have a responsibility because they're going to be imitated. This takes us back to Gregory Bateson's theory of double bind, do what I say, not what I do. And this is what the parents do nowadays, they keep playing and looking at their smartphone, and they forbid the children to do the same.
Yeah.
So I think that all this is very interesting. It's very interesting. So I'm fascinated by this theory. Some people, but I think if you, as I said once to René Girard, once you've put on the mimetic glasses, the world looks different.
Yes, I agree.
The world looks different because you suddenly realize things that you didn't realize before.
And everything seems more mechanistic in some ways, Human drama seems more mechanistic. When I watch birds fight in a pond, and I see how symmetrical they are, it just reminds me that this mimetic I think it's magnetism. I agree with my physicist friend, that I think it's, when we see someone has something that we think we lack, we feel like they have the opposite, and opposites attract, And then when you get closer, you realize, wait a second, that's the same. You're too close, and you repel. So then we get attracted from far away, we repel, because from a far distance, it looks like they have something opposite. Opposite poles attract, positive attracts to negative. But then we get closer, we say, no, you're too close, and we repel, So it's magnetism to me.
Yeah. It actually, it looks like magnetism, and it works like magnetism.
Yeah.
And I tell you, I mean, on the 18th century, Franz Anton Mesmer had already had this idea, to the point that his big book that he published was called Animal Magnetism.
But did Girard, did he ever talk about perhaps there is a physical atomistic explanation for this too, or no? Did he never?
No. The only physical thing is the discovery of the mirror neurons.
Right. So
how does this work? It's very difficult to explain.
Right.
Very difficult to explain. And what is also now, maybe in the future, research will develop with the help of quantic physics.
Yeah.
Yeah. With the fact that in quantic physics, the object is determined by the look of the observer.
Yeah.
In other words, the light can be a corpuscule or can be a wave, depending on the person that looks at it.
Yeah. Yeah.
It can. So all this maybe is interesting also in in thinking about the theory of psychoanalysis, with which I don't agree basically, but of course, psychoanalysis is based on the analysis of memory, but the personal observer is observing right now and looking back
Yeah.
into his memory, and therefore the memories that he evokes are not exactly what they were. The proof is that if there is a car accident and you have 10 people looking at it, they all are taken to the to the police. Each one has a different story of the same thing, which they all saw.
Yeah. What do you think about, because when I tell people that everything we desire is imitated besides the basic, survival needs, a lot of people, there's a lot of visceral pushback against that. Do you believe that, would you say, for example, you have these geniuses like Nikola Tesla and Beethoven, when they come up with their flash of insight to come up with a new type of electricity, or, obviously they're imitating role models that teach them the engineering and the different, or if they're a musician, they learn from a role model but when they get that flash of insight, dun, 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 or they get the Nikola Tesla light bulb experiment, is that truly imitated too? Or is that the divine kind of in breaking in, or some kind of transcendent type of experience?
Well, there are two things in what you say. First of all, you have to realize that imitation can add information or take out information from the model. You see, like for instance, you're teaching some child to write. Obviously, he will write much less beautifully than the professor. And if you're teaching somebody to sing, well, the first time he's singing, he will sing in a much less nice way than the professor's teacher. When Leonardo da Vinci paints Mona Lisa, of course, he loses a whole lot of information about her. Her laugh, her smell, her shape, the way she talks, the way she walks, the way and so forth. But he adds enough information to the model so that it goes through the centuries as a masterpiece. That's the first thing. The second thing is, what is consciousness? You see, there are two ways. Nowadays, there is a new theory of a certain number of neurologists who think that the brain, consciousness of the brain, works as a radio. It doesn't produce consciousness. It just, how should I say, conveys.
It receives. Like an antenna.
Conveys.
Yeah.
Exactly. And so, of course, the people who can test that say, well, yeah, but I mean, if the brain is damaged, they say, yeah, but if the radio is damaged, it's the same thing. You can't catch anymore the thing. You see what I mean?
Yeah.
So this
I had that in a car where the antenna was broken. I couldn't get any radio reception.
Exactly. But if you have your brain completely working and functioning and everything, maybe the consciousness is actually the brain is the receiver of a sort of a universal cosmic consciousness. And of course, if you go through that theory, which is fairly new, it may also explain how brains are connected through this cosmic movement.
Right.
So it's, I mean, there's
this is the most exciting stuff, because it's the ability to link the hard sciences and the social sciences together. I just think
that's it. And my idea is that, in fact, all those sciences, I mean, my big idea is that there is a unicity of the world, physical, mental, and we're all, sort of ruled by pretty much similar mechanisms. Of course, I may be right or wrong. I don't know. This probably will be, after my death, will be discussed many, many years. But anyway, I personally, I tell you, I've been very much helped in my practice, in my clinical practice, by all those ideas that we've just discussed. I have. And, patients seem to be benefiting from this type of analysis. And I give, in the Mimetic Brain, I give some examples.
And
And by the way,
what's the title of your new book? I just want to make sure we get that listed for folks.
Unfortunately, it's in French, not yet
Oh.
stated. But do you read French?
No, unfortunately not. I need to, huh?
You're
looking for a translator? I'll do the audio book for Americans if you want. I have a radio show. I know how to do the whole radio theatrics.
Oh yeah, why not? Sure. And no, the book that's just been published is called Alterity.
Authority? What?
Alterity, otherness.
Oh, okay, cool. Yeah, okay, interesting.
It's always about the same things, And in that book also, one thing I stress is that since we are compelled to imitate each other, there is just a little teeny-weeny little window of freedom that is left to us. And that window is the choice of the model. Right now, as I understand it, in the States, people are sort of killing each other or shooting at each other or cursing each other. And if they take Trump for a model or if they take Biden for a model, they have a totally different outview, So the choice of the model is something very important. And the responsibility of the model is something very important, because if you want to attract people, you have to make your model attractive. That is the key that's the key issue of publicity. If you want to sell a perfume, you don't go around the streets, with a bottle of perfume, asking the women to smell it. No, you just show them a very attractive, prestigious model wearing this perfume or talking about it, and then all the women go and buy it. And if publicity works, it generates billions. And if a psychological theory generates millions, there must be some truth in it. Right?
Yeah.
I'd like to ask a question. Oh, okay.
Tell me.
Can you hear me? Okay. I'd like to ask the question of, having, say, one model versus multiple models, right? If you've got, say I want Rene Girard to be my model, and then I want my grandfather to be my model, and then I want the King of England to be my model. I want them all to be my models, but I don't know how to, incorporate all of them into my life, equally or something like that. I mean, how?
That's a very, very interesting question, because I think that in fact, you are absolutely right. You have to amalgamate all those models, and you will be the result of that amalgamation. You will be the patchwork of all those models. And that's why you are normal. Because if you have only one model, you get to fanaticism.
Right.
You have one model like Hitler, you're crazy. If you have one model like, the Islamic extremist, you become a terrorist and so on. If you have one model like Stalin, you become a communist, and you go completely crazy because you have only one model. You have to avoid having only one model. You've always have to take from each model what he can give you and what you can integrate into your personality. Of course, some models could be more important than others. For instance, I have no difficulty admitting that René Girard was, for me, a very important model compared to, let's say, one of my professors in psychiatry, sure. But each model, starting with the parents, has to be integrated in the building of yourself. Now, let me tell you something funny. If you take my book, which you have in hand, and show it to the audience, you see, that's in the perspective of the publisher. That's psychiatry without any structure or meaning before reading the book. Now, if you turn it upside down,
Okay.
turn it upside down,
Oh.
you see that it is meaningful. And after reading the book, psychiatry means something and has a shape and
Oh, that's cool.
represents something.
Yeah.
So the publisher had this very interesting idea, and I thought, I would
Pretty neat.
I would show it to you.
Yeah, that's cool. I like that.
Don't you think it's cool?
Yeah, mesmerizing. I want to ask you, you talk, you and Rene Girard were very, and you did this with your individual psychology, which I'm sure Shannon can try to flesh out some more from you, what that entails. But just something that comes to my mind immediately is that, Jesus says to model servitude. So wash the feet of those who want to imitate you. And but because the crowd, you said, we have to make our models attractive. If we want to be a model, we have to be somewhat attractive. But if we imitate Jesus, isn't that unattractive? Because Jesus.
Let me tell you, this is a very, very interesting question that has preoccupied me. Actually, if you look at it carefully and read the Gospels carefully, which I've done recently, you realize that Jesus never says, imitate me. Jesus says, follow me. Follow me. And if you follow something, if you follow somebody, you acknowledge by that fact that his desire precedes yours. In other words, you sort of acknowledge your comprehension and apprehension of mimetic desire. And in fact, you have to follow Jesus and to walk in his steps and then take your own way, but along his steps, along his voyage, let's say. And I think this is very interesting because lots of people say we have to imitate Jesus. No, because when you imitate somebody, rivalry is there. If your best friend introduces you to his girlfriend, of course, your mimetic desire will immediately go to the girlfriend and you say, hey, you have a nice girlfriend, so I'd like to have the same. And what happens is you might become rivals. This is what Shakespeare described in his play, The Two Gentlemen of Verona.
Isn't that what you see a lot with counseling and psychologists? They become a rival to the marriage partner that they're supposed to be trying to fix.
Yeah. This is one of my big theories, is that in the office of a psychiatrist, there are not two people, but three persons: the psychiatrist, the patient, and the disease, the neurosis or the psychosis. And the whole political issue is to find out whether the patient is going to ally with the psychiatrist against his disease or neurosis and try to finish with it, or whether he is there as an ally to his neurosis to demonstrate and prove how stupid and null the psychiatrist is. And there are many patients who come with that idea.
Interesting.
All they want is to demonstrate that the psychiatrist doesn't know how to do it, and he's stupid.
When Paul says that we become one flesh in marriage, how can you avoid mimetic rivalry when we're becoming so close that we become one flesh?
One of my books exists in English called Genesis of Desire. If you haven't read it, try to read it. It's all about that.
I have it on an audiobook. Yeah, I've been listening to it. It just started, yeah. But
try to see it. And I have designed in that book, a small picture, a seesaw on the beach. And the couple is like two people on each end of the seesaw. Let's say the man and the woman, or nowadays you have to say the man and the man, the woman and the woman. You can't say anymore that there's a difference between men and women. So the problem is this: the one that goes up on the seesaw the other one becomes jealous, rivalrous. And the problem is that the only way for him to go up is to bring the other one down. That's what I call the devilish seesaw. And this is extremely true in couples, you know, because you can also, I have developed in that book another type of jealousy. I say there is a jealousy of the third person. So you're jealous of the third party. In other words, you're jealous of the gentleman with whom your wife is talking. But if you're and your wife or your mate or whatever are just the two of you, and your mate comes home and says, you know, you can't imagine, today I had a fantastic interview with my boss, and he gave me a rise, and he said, you know, you're a great guy. The other one becomes jealous, not of the third, but of the second, in other words, of the mate, and comes out with the, you know, with an answer like, "Who the hell do you think you are?" You know, you seem to be very happy with yourself, you know? But why don't you take the garbage down first?
Isn't that what lions do? When you see a male lion approach a lioness to mate, the lioness will hiss at him, and if he flinches, she'll keep hissing at him. But if he stands his ground and doesn't act offended by her hiss or growl, then he gets to mate. Remember that? You see that in male lions and female lions do that. It's like a test, you know. If she growls at you and you flinch, she'll keep growling and you won't get to mate. But if you stand your ground when the growl comes, that's the male that gets to mate with all the lionesses in the pride.
This is absolutely, you're absolutely right, you see, and I think that it is interesting to see again what I was saying a little earlier on. Everything in the world seems to obey laws and rules of the same type. Of course, they take different forms, different shapes, you know, whether we are in the stars or in individual psychology. But basically, there's something common. I believe that very much. And it is comforting because it leads you to finding that there is some sense in the universe. And this is today what is lacking in our world, is people do not find any meaning, any sense in life. And they wonder what the hell they are doing there and what for, you know. And so there is a lot of vacuum in their brains. And, you know, one thing I always say to my students, you know, Freud, at his time, already had the things that were existing. This is why he was talking about psychotic structure and neurotic structure and pervert structures. Nowadays in psychiatry, you don't see structures anymore. You see destructurated people. There's no more structure, except in very, very, very few people. But most of the young people especially have no more structure. This is why they go to drugs, they go to, you know, violence.
How do we get back on track? Help us out.
Well, I tell you.
Did we listen to too many French intellectuals in university?
Yeah. Too much Derrida.
Derrida, yeah. Not my cup of tea.
Too much French Fanon.
Yeah. No, I don't know. I think that, what was I saying?
No, I was asking how would we get back on track? How do we gain the structure that that we've lost?
Yeah, I think because what is happening now in France is that the trend is to criticize and minimize and despise our past. We keep saying that we have been bad people, we have killed people, we have had religious wars, we have created slaves, we have done this and that and the other, and we start taking down the statues of these people. And I think that if we continue like this, we will increase the destructuration of the youth, because we are destroying our model. So if they cannot respect or admire our model, they won't imitate it. But since they have no alternative model, they will lost. They are lost. So the only thing, we are responsible for destroying our model. Whether our model is very good or very bad, that's not the point. The point is that our model, we should be proud of, we should exist as a model so that people can join us. Otherwise, they will look for other models, and God only knows what they will find or create or invent.
Well, speaking of models, how come Marx and Foucault and all these revolutionary, Herbert Marcuse and all these different revolutionary thinkers are so sticky as models for the youth? It's like Marx has got a lot of, he stood the test of time. He's still hot and sexy for a lot of young folks in different ways, It's not old Marx. It's not classic Santa Claus Marx, but it's morphed into, these different, you know what I mean?
Or Nietzsche.
Let me give you an example. I think nowadays, if you interrogate those youngsters who claim that they are Marxist or that they like Marx and so on, practically none of them has ever read Marx seriously. They have picked a few sentences. So now if you look into, let's say, I'm going to use an image. If you look into the brain of all those young anarchists or violent people or drug addicts and so on, it's just like a soup. And you dig into the soup, you find a little piece of Marx, and a little piece of Freud, and a little piece of Foucault, and a little piece of whatever, but it's nothing structured. It's a soup. Yeah. Their brains are absolutely marshmallows.
Because they haven't had any boundaries, right?
Unfortunately, it is our fault.
Right.
It is our fault. If
What
we
I
look
tell
at
you, David. Told you.
What?
No, I'm telling David. I said I told you. It's the baby boomers, huh?
What about a counterexample of a role model that has become more resurgent in recent years from a different side is Carl Jung. And I know that you probably don't agree with his theory, right? But Carl Jung has had a resurgence in popularity amongst the youth in the West, especially online, with the rise of Jordan Peterson, the psychologist who borrows a lot from Carl Jung and the archetypes of, you have to be the true self and find, imitate Christ. And this whole idea of the monomyth points to Christ. Now, obviously, I think that differs a lot with what you and Rene Girard developed, but it does, Jordan Peterson as a psychologist has said, you got to clean up your own room before you want to take on the world's problems. There's an intuitive wisdom there, isn't there?
Yeah, but you see, Carl Gustav Jung was a very, very learned man. And what he actually found in his theory is the similarity of the production of human brain, no matter what the century, no matter what the country, no matter what, and he finds similarities between Maya pyramids and Egyptian pyramids and, the image of the woman of Mary and so on and so forth, the image of the mother. I think there's a lot of truth in that. But to what point, question is, to what point is that mimetic? How much people get inspired from one to the other? It is quite true that in architecture, for instance, you realize if you look carefully at architecture, that there are periods of time when everybody does the same kind of cathedral or the same kind of house, you know, or the same kind of decor, and then it changes. So I think Jung had a lot of things about it. That's what he called the unconscious, the collective, or universal unconscious.
Right.
But personally,
that could be that Mesmer's magnetic fluid. Right?
Yeah, maybe. But you see, I don't buy unconsciousness because if I go back to the theory of our brain being the receiver of consciousness, then unconsciousness has no meaning. Making the unconscious, the great arena where our id and our ego and our fight each other, and we are finally, our action is the result of those fights, doesn't make any sense to me. Because I think everything is interindividual. It's not that everything happens inside our brain and then we come out with something. Everything comes out of our relation to the other. This is why with René Girard, we suppressed the word interindividual. We said interdividual. See? To just show that what happens, the psychological fact lies in between, in the mysterious transparency of the interdividual rapport.
It truly is a different person, isn't it? Like the Holy Spirit.
It is, yeah.
Holy Spirit is a third person, but also a relationship between the Father and the Son. He's both person and relationship.
Holy Spirit is just the hypostasis of the actual relationship, which is so perfect, so non-rivalrous, so model in each side, that it hypostasizes, it becomes a Holy Spirit of the relationship. And that's what should inspire us all. But
yeah,
I don't think we're any near to.
I want to ask you about Girard's relationship to, philosophy and things like that, because I kind of picked up through different, videos that I've watched that he kind of had a critique of philosophy, as a discipline. He didn't really care for, philosophy as and so I'm trying to figure out more. Like, can you tell us more about that?
Every philosophy is an explanation of the world. And Girard was more attached, had more respect for great Romance, great writers. His attention, and he was mesmerized, fascinated by Shakespeare, Cervantes, Dostoevsky, Stendhal, Proust, people like that, because he said that they had, in their writings, described the reality of the brain and human functioning, the way feelings work, and the way desire works, mimetically. And that in all those writings, the mimetic desire is always depicted by these people, whereas philosophers go to extremely sophisticated explanations, and they build their own world that has, in René Girard's mind, no common with the real world.
Right. No real grounding. Yeah.
No real grounding. Exactly.
Yeah.
Good wording. No real grounding. Yeah. Well, that's it. You see. So I think there's another 2 or 3 books that I've written, and I would like them to be translated into English, but my last translator, the one who made the Mimetic Brain, my friend Trevor Merrill, is too busy now. He's professor at Caltech in Pasadena, and he doesn't have time to translate that. So I'm very distressed trying to find the translator.
We'll try to help you find one, maybe. I'll ask around.
Yeah, if you can, sure, because
your work
I'm
is
sure
very,
that,
you guys, I mean, you really trained, the work, Things Hidden Since the Foundation of the World has changed so many people's lives. So any other works that we need to get to the English, I'll do whatever we can to get the right guy who you need to put you in touch with them,
my books translated in English are The Puppet of Desire,
Yeah.
Genesis of Desire, Psychopolitics, and The Mimetic Brain. In psychopolitics, I try to show that, populations or people or countries have the same type of reaction as two people. There is, mimetic rivalry.
Yeah.
How long have we lived the mimetic rivalry during the Cold War between the United States and the Soviet Union,
That's why that's why the American priestly caste hate it when Trump wants to be friends with Putin and Kim Jong-un, because he's having dinner with Zacchaeus, He's dining with Putin. He's dining with Putin. Little Zacchaeus you're not supposed to go dine with the tax collector,
Right, but you see, my idea, but maybe I'm going to shock you. I think that Donald Trump is taking Putin and Kim Jong-un and all these people and Erdogan as models. He would like to be like that.
Yeah, probably in some ways, yeah.
He thinks, they are great guys. They rule their country. They cannot be moved out of office. And that's exactly what he would like to do.
Right.
And I'm sure that sometimes at night, he thinks, my God, I'm sorry, I'm president of the United States with such a complicated constitution, democratic and so on. I would like to be in a country which I can rule really as I please.
What do you think Rene Girard would, because it seems like, he passed right before his theory was just exploding into like observational data everywhere we look, with the rise of all of these, like you see the cancel culture, the Me Too contagion, the streets are filled with flames in America. It's just right.
The world has turned Girardian, unfortunately, after he died. And but this happens always with all thinkers,
Yeah.
It does happen. But the problem is that now at least Girard has given us the tools to understand what we see. Maybe 100 years ago, we would have seen the same thing. We would not understand what the hell was going on. Now we see it, but the fact of seeing it does not prevent the situation. I always give this example to my students. I say, even Isaac Newton, who had discovered, gravitation, when he walked on a piece of soap, he would fall himself.
Yeah,
he would fall on the ground. So knowing the gravitation doesn't prevent him from falling. And knowing mimetic rivalry doesn't prevent you or anybody else from being rival to the other.
That's true. So what's our hope? How do we get out of it? Our country's losing its boundaries. In America, I don't want to be too American-centric here, but, from our perspective, we've got cities on fire. The whole world's watching. We've got protests, injustice. People don't trust in the elections. And America, like it or not, is a model for many other countries. They look, if America's falling apart, I guess there's no hope for democracy here in my country too. Let's try dictatorship. So this is a scary time for the world. Where do we go? How do we ground ourselves back into healthy?
America for many years was a fantastic role model for all countries. When it started, in my view, it started going out of the way when it's decided to impose its democratic model on countries by the use of weapons. Like the West has tried to impose democracy on Afghanistan, Iraq, Libya, you name them. And every time it fails because you cannot impose a model. And that's the main difference in psychology and psychiatry between an order and a suggestion. If you suggest something, the guy absorbs the suggestion and tends to imitate what he's seeing. You know, you don't force people to drink Nespresso. You just suggest to them that, you know, George Clooney drinks Nespresso, maybe you should do the same. But you don't force them. You don't, you know, sort of hold them by the hand and say, now you drink the Nespresso, or else. No, you don't do that. But the order which they tried to give was counterproductive. It started being counterproductive in Vietnam, in Afghanistan, it is still in Iraq, everywhere. You can't force people. You have to make your, as I said, you have to make your model attractive enough so that people respect it. And if they respect it, if they admire it, they want to imitate it. But if you force them.
That's what a soldier, I asked a soldier who went to Afghanistan, and he said, you know, we don't use the level of brutal violence that would be necessary to force the local population to respect our nation building attempts. So they say, you know, the local population may want to stone their daughter or something for something sexual. And we as occupiers cannot use sacrificial violence to enforce a Christian aesthetic about how you should treat daughters. We cannot, because we wouldn't stomach it. You know, the level of violence, this is what the soldier was telling me, the level of violence that we would have to employ to get the local population to surrender is not a level of violence that the Americans would ever condone officially, like crucifying or whipping people or stoning. You know, we would never do that. And so therefore, it's an impotent sacrifice. You know, we have impotent sacrifice.
Yeah. You the only way you can master a situation like this, indeed, is just to, you know, kill everybody in Afghanistan and put other people in it. Right. So that, but you see, this is a very great lesson that Girard was stressing all the time. Jesus Christ didn't impose anything, and he finally was a victim. He got killed. And look how his ideas and his model developed in the world today. If he had tried to impose his ideas like Julius Caesar or something like that, he would not have had this kind of followers.
He would have ended up like Barabbas, just another revolutionary, right?
Yeah, right.
So I want to, yeah, I want to ask one more question about, you know, I'm a humanities major like Girard, and so I've you know, what do you think the future is for like the humanities and the social sciences, right? If you know, because I hear a lot of people saying, you know, those disciplines are not going anywhere and there's no future for them, you know, as far as careers, as far as work goes, you know, as far as you know, study for humanities majors, like, you know, humanities majors, social sciences, anthropology, you know, history, you know, it's not going anywhere.
Can't be bothered anymore to study the past. Right. They want to only make the most of the present. They have externalized their brains. They put their brain in their computer and their phone and everything. If you take today a young guy or even an adult, put him in a jail and remove his phone and remove his iPad or his computer, you're removing his brain. He doesn't know who he is anymore. You see what I mean? Yeah. And so I think that the duty or the only way for people like us, you know, humanities, social psychologists and things like that, is to build ourselves as models by a process of initiation. What is initiation? Initiation is the death, the agony, death, and resurrection symbolically, which means that we have to accept every day to die, that yesterday is dead, and today we have to live and to make the most of the present moment. Because right now, people are so mesmerized by the future, but what's going to happen tomorrow and so on, they don't take the time to just live and enjoy life as it is right now. Not tomorrow, not yesterday, you know. But this also has been emphasized by many philosophers, especially Spinoza, who said that, you know, if we look at the past, we only have regrets and remorse, and the future is just the projection of that, of the two.
Yeah.
So I mean, I mean, we could talk for hours.
Yeah, I want to land the plane. I really appreciate you taking this time with us, and
Yeah.
It was a pleasure.
I think.
And I really, do you ever come to Paris or anything?
No, but I will if
Don't
there's
got
an
that kind of money.
invitation. I'm not in Paris. I'm in Spain. I will be in Paris, and would be delighted to receive you there and talk further. The first 3 or 4 months of 21.
Okay. Well, very
If
good.
you have an opportunity.
Will everything be open there, or will it all be closed down and locked down?
No, that doesn't depend on me. It depends on the virus.
Well,
And
I really,
unfortunately, I don't control the virus.
well, I really think that your developments with Girard, both of you are pioneering a discipline that's going to be the future for a lot of sciences, and I hope that I can learn more from you and how that we can try to make that link between the hard and the social sciences. I think that's so fascinating to me, you know.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate your interest in my work, and I really appreciate you to calling me, and I really enjoyed our conversation. I really did.
Thank you.
And I hope we will get some more talks in the future.
Yeah, that would be a pleasure.
Maybe in real life.
Yeah, that would be really fun. It's much better in real life in Paris. I like that.
With a nice meal in between.
There you go. All right, take care. You have a good one. Thank you for your time.
All right.
Thank you for calling, and all the best to you. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Thanks.